Hello, hello. Welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'm your host, David Goyle. And before I get into it with my first guest, Devi, I just wanted to give a quick introduction of who am I, why did I make this podcast, and why the name The Almost Dropouts. So, from the who am I perspective, my name is Davik, like I said before, and I'm a computer engineering student at the University of Waterloo. I just finished my 3A term, so my third year, first semester, and I'm currently in New York for an internship. Why did I decide to make this podcast? I think students have a pretty unique perspective on a lot of different things, and specifically I wanted to focus on education, engineering, and the tech industry as a whole, the different trends that are happening, some of the news that's breaking out in the tech industry, etc. And I didn't really find any podcasts that brought that unique perspective, that student perspective. So I thought, hey, why not? Give it a shot. So that's what I'm doing here. And some of you might be wondering, why did I choose the name The Almost Dropouts? And I think quite simply, it really reflects my time in university. I had to struggle a lot to get through university and through my engineering degree to where I am right now. And I thought the Almost Dropouts really reflected that journey that I had. That's not to say I don't have skills and talents. I definitely do, but I had to struggle a lot to develop them. And I think it'd be interesting to hear from a perspective that isn't necessarily the 4.0 GPA or the star athlete. It's just somebody who's really interested in the tech industry and computer engineering as a whole. So yeah, that's why. Well, without further ado, I'll let my first guest introduce himself, my friend Devi. Devi, take it away.
Hey, Davik. Thanks for having me on as your first guest. It's quite the honor.
Who knows what the future holds, right?
Yeah, when people look back at, they'll be, like when you're all famous and stuff, they'll go back and be like, I wonder what Davik's, first Almost Dropouts podcast was. And they'll see me on it, and, maybe it'll make me gain like 5 followers on Instagram. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome if I ever reached that point, but long ways to go. So, but regardless, thanks for taking the time out to talk with me today. I do really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. So I guess a little introduction. I'm Devi, or Devidutta Biswabharati. I'm currently in my third year, like same, I guess, level of study as Davik in mechanical engineering. But I'm currently working for a company in Kitchener. I'm doing hardware design for a design services company that specializes in IoT products. So basically my job is to, my company in general, what we do is we go from like hardware design all the way to firmware to manufacturing of Internet of Things products. So that's basically like my background right now. And I am super excited to be on this podcast, Davik. What are we gonna be talking about today?
Yeah, Devi, I was thinking of talking about education. I know me and you have talked about it in the past, and I thought it was something that would be interesting to talk about. And that could be, talking about our experiences in Waterloo, our experiences in engineering, or just education in general, where it's heading, the future trends for it. And so I guess to start off, let's talk about our experiences in Waterloo engineering and Waterloo in general, positive, negative, the whole deal.
Oh, man. Where to start, man? Where do we even start? I guess we start in first year. You remember first year?
Yeah, first year was 2016 September is when we entered Waterloo. It was a long time ago now, but lots of memories and lots of lessons that we've learned.
Yeah, I think the first thing that kind of stuck out to me was like, wow, like we really, I mean, yeah, we don't have that much responsibility towards others still right now. We're still at a stage of our lives where we're mostly focused on ourselves. But the first thing that kind of hit me was like, wow, for the first time, we really have to be responsible for ourselves. Like when I saw my sister and brother-in-law who had dropped me off on residence, actually, when I saw that car kind of drive off into the sunset, like it hit me like shit. Like this is this is life now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I I I I think that's one thing we can all relate to, especially like the first day when our parents, brother-in-law, sister, whoever, they leave and you're all alone. That's definitely a feeling that a lot of first years can relate to, because it's like a shock. Because before you're prepping yourself that yeah, it's gonna happen, but then when it happens, it's like, oh my god, this actually happened. So it's interesting.
I walked back to room with you guys. I don't think you were there yet. I think Bosco had come, and I was just like, whoa, like, yo, like this is it now. This is where I'm living, you know. Like I don't like what now? What next? I guess I'm gonna like cook dinner now. Like there's no structure. But it's been a lot of freedom, which I think it's helped both of us grow a lot. But also the same freedom I find is something that takes a bit to get used to. And something actually I've noticed as well with my students. So I guess some context. I was a residence liaison, which I don't know why Waterloo uses this terminology, but basically it's like a residence advisor for first years. So I was doing that for the past year at Waterloo. And something I noticed amongst my students as well, like that freedom, when you kind of get used to it, when you learn to respect it and you learn to master it, is something that's super valuable and you grow a lot from it. But at the same time, in the beginning, that freedom, like, you know, like what do you do with it? It's both like a good thing and a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny because in high school you're always just, craving that freedom that, oh, when can I make decisions for myself? When will my parents let me just be? And when will I be free? And then, yeah, when you finally get it, of course, the first couple of days, it's really nice. But later it's like, oh my God, I actually have to, take care of myself. I have to learn to be independent. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand how hard it is until you actually have to do it. And being away from your parents and, having to actually make decisions for yourself, that's really tough for a lot of people. And I know for me, I really had to go through that in first year. And, it's interesting.
Yeah, legit. You have to learn when you come back home and you're like, oh my goodness, I've been eating like KD for like the last 3 weeks in a row. Like I need to eat something else now. Otherwise, that cheese blend, whatever fake cheese they use in that's going to be running through my veins any second now. So it's a big learning curve.
Yeah, and going back to the main topic of education, university is interesting because it's not only learning, the concepts and other things you need for your degree. It's also learning how to fend for yourself and how to balance the different things of your life. And I know, at least from my experience, that's one of the things that's the hardest for kids to learn in university. Not the concept necessarily of their degree, but just balancing that out with the rest of the rest of their livelihood.
Yeah, I agree. I think first year for a lot of us was probably one of our, if not the hardest terms. And I mean, it was probably by far the easiest one academically. I think a lot of difficulties comes from everything else and then managing kind of that with the academics.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess to transition, specifically for engineering, what have your experience been for engineering and trying to ramp up from the engineering standpoint?
I mean, well, first, I guess, real shocking experience was, trying to get a job. Dude, when we came in, right, especially, so like for, I guess, your audience who are not familiar with Waterloo's format, with Waterloo Engineering, everyone is in a co-op, like internship-based program. And depending on which stream you are in, either 4 stream or 8 stream, we were in 4 stream. It depends when you start co-op. So since we were in 4 stream, we did our first internship 4 months after starting university. And so, man, like that, like basically you start school and then 1 week in, you have to like be ready to start looking for jobs. And oh my goodness, I think you remember how much I struggled with that process. Like
Yeah,
I
that
had, dude, when you rejected that one job, remember in main round,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was data entry, and like in hindsight, that was like a good decision you made because the soft dev job you did, you ended up doing that term was like amazing experience. But when you rejected that job, dude, I was so annoyed. I'm like, I'm trying to get an interview out here, and you're rejecting a job. Like, for me, I would have done any job. Like, if like the career center would have approved like barista at like Starbucks for an internship, 100% would have taken it.
Yeah, I know. I think it's pretty interesting, because it's not only learning how to fend for yourself, learning new concepts, but for Waterloo specifically, it's also finding a job, an engineering job. When we don't have any engineering experience, any engineering really work done under our belt, and for a lot of us, we've never had a retail job or any job for that matter. So now they expect us to come in and get ready to give interviews in a month and make our resumes to actually get hired. And it's definitely very interesting because from the company's perspective, they're really taking a flyer on you. It's pretty much like they're taking a second round draft pick or undrafted draft pick in the NBA draft on you. They're just banking on your potential and hoping that you can do good work for them. You can contribute.
Yeah, it's crazy. Without any life experience, man, you're barely a fetus at like 18 years old, or not even when you're hired for that first job. I think I was 17. No, I had just turned 18. Like that's that's crazy. Like you're basic, yeah. Like and getting hired into like an actual company doing real engineering work. That's pretty insane. But yeah, man, I remember that struggle like it was yesterday. Like just not having any interviews, and it's such a reality check because like for the first time when you come into university, you're no longer that big fish, right? Because you just moved from the pond to the lake, and all of a sudden you look around and like you thought that robotics team experience was really cool. Well, guess what? That's kind of like a prereq here. Everyone has that. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
you thought like that. Hello World project you've done in C++ was pretty neat. You see people who have like portfolios filled with like applications and stuff that they've made. So it's like, yeah, it's you're no longer a big fish in a small pond. And I think that reality check hits hard, and it certainly did hit me hard when I was just like, I'm not even getting an interview. Like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? And at some point, it's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. It's just you just got to keep staying persistent.
That's one thing I think I've learned in the job hunt, and I think it's pretty good advice for anybody looking for a job, is that persistence is key. And yeah, there's a chance that you get a job instantly, or you're super competitive that everybody wants you, but for the average person, it's going to be mostly having the will to keep applying and knowing that the process will reward you eventually. Not losing that, drive to find that job. That's definitely really important.
I mean, yeah, sure did reward you. How's New York City, man?
Yeah, well, I mean, New York City is great, man. What can I say? And I think that's the nice thing about Waterloo Engineering, is because of the co-op program, you get to experience a lot of different things, whether that be different hardware software co-ops or doing co-ops at different places. I know we have a big US connection, so having that is definitely really nice. And going more back into education, it was really interesting for me that when I was first coming into university, I was so used to learning by one-on-one engagement, and whether that be with my teacher and high school teacher or with peers, that's how my best way of learning was. And what you learn really quick in university is that professors won't give you that personal engagement, and you have to adapt your learning style to that. So personally, I adapted my learning style by recognizing who would give me that time. And of course, you can go to office hours or talk to a professor after class, but even then, it's sort of unlikely that they'll give you that same personal engagement that a fellow peer, a fellow student will give you, or a TA. Now, I've had very mixed bag of TAs, some that were really good and some that were pretty bad. But you just have to find a way of finding out how you learn. And, that could be, you want just with the textbook learning by yourself, or you making study groups to study with other people. But learning how to learn is something that you have to do when you first enter university. And I know that sounds like, of course, you should know how to learn by the time you enter university, but rediscovering that in this new environment is something first you have to go through. And so I was wondering, I know you're uber smart, but how was your experience of adjusting to the different learning style that university has?
Well, first, thank you for that compliment. I don't get that often, but thank you. But with the whole thing about learning, I think big part about university is honestly teaching yourself to learn. And that's kind of what you mentioned there. In high school, there's plenty of opportunity to have some one-on-one time with the teacher, or to get a lot of resources and spend a lot of time on certain concepts and put focus into each person's individual learning style. And you can oftentimes make it through without really knowing how you learn best. But I think with university, you need to know. You need to know how you function best and how you learn best, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to teach yourself a lot. And the main thing you can do, and the best favor you can do yourself, I think, is teach yourself how you learn. For me, I actually like learning in class. I like reading. That's a format that works really well for me, and I like it when I listen to a professor speak, actually, which I think is not the case for a lot of people, but that's actually a way that I enjoy learning.
Yeah.
But to be honest, one reason, I'm just going to say, hot take, whatever, right? For most professors, teaching isn't their primary job.
100%.
It's not their job. A lot of them don't even want to teach. I've definitely had some professors who really love teaching and they make it a primary focus. But honestly, the other profs I've had, which is a lot of them that don't really teach well or don't enjoy teaching, I don't even blame them, because it's really a small part of their job oftentimes. Oftentimes they're dedicated to research because they're phenomenal researchers, and teaching is something they have to do because it's just, it's just something that's tacked onto their job description.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting that, on a side note, that the most esteemed professors who have done the craziest research or have the most accolades tend to be the ones that, aren't the greatest teachers. And the ones that don't have that usually are the better ones, which is a pretty interesting, trend.
Guaranteed. Dude, if I see a professor is if I see okay, for this next course, I have a professor who's on X, Y, and Z committee and is super esteemed, I know that's a course that I'm going to have to, get the textbook for, because yikes. And yeah, you can't just think about it. How many, there's 24 hours in the day and you sleep for, a good chunk of it too. You have other stuff you have to do. How much time do you realistically have? You go to work, let's say, right? 9 to 5, whatever. Right? How much time do you realistically have to do everything else in your day? Yeah. I can't imagine how one individual can possibly do all these things and do it all to the best of their ability. When you have a professor who's supposed to be on XYZ committee and is supposed to be, having this giant lab that consistently produces high quality research, and then they're still teaching a couple of subjects, something isn't going to be done at 100%. And realistically, if you look at the career path professors have to take, it makes sense that teaching is the first thing that's going to be reduced in quality. Look at the career path for a prof, right? The typical career path is what? You do undergrad, do your master's, do a PhD, maybe a couple of postdocs, keep on doing research. And then eventually, if a position opens up, you try out teaching. And then you have basically a few year window to get tenure. And during that window, what you need to do to get tenure isn't, be a successful teacher per se. That's part of it. And another part of it is you need to, produce a good amount of research, and you also need to, have, or you have to have some sort of like administrative status and, do that kind of work. So when you're looking at it, like, most of our profs, I mean, there are some that have been taken from industry, or some profs that, just done a master's and have like done it for their love of teaching. But most of our profs, they've gone into this career path because they love research and they're really good at it. And they've done it for a while. And then when they finally get their first teaching job, their focus is to, get job security, because they are basically on this limited window to get tenure. And once they get tenure, that's like ultimate job security. That's like better than a government job, basically. And like, to attain this, a big part of what they have to do isn't teaching. So, we feel as students like, oh, we're, entitled to a good, education, which we are, because we pay a lot of money for it. But realistically, the people who are providing us their education, that's not even the first thing on their job description.
Yeah, and just like you brought up, there's only 24 hours in a day. And, for the esteemed profs, they're brought in to the university for their research. So that's their focus. And most of their day is just focusing on that. And the students are more a side note type of thing, which, I mean, of course, they're brought into the university for their research, so they have to focus on that. But as a student, of course, you're losing out because the profs, of course, the profs that focus on you more give you the more you gain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's pretty interesting. And just to transition a little bit, one of the things I think a lot of engineering students face, regardless of year, first, second, third, or fourth year, is trying to maintain a work-life balance. And, it's pretty tough not getting sucked into one thing or the other, not getting so caught up in the cycle of studying, leet coding, or etc. And just, not doing anything for yourself. And whether that is, just taking a minute or a day to, relax, listen to some music, maybe watch some Netflix, to, not studying at all and then going out to party all the time. It's pretty easy to get caught up into both sides of the spectrum. And I've seen it personally. And it tends to not work out. So definitely maintaining a work-life balance is such a tough thing for a lot of students, including myself. And it's pretty funny that, this summer before Waterloo Frosh come in, a lot of them ask me, what concepts have you learned? What have you done? And the one advice I have, I tell them the concepts I've learned, but the one piece of advice that I always have them is enjoy that last summer off, especially for Waterloo students, because we keep transitioning from co-op or internships to school. That's really the last summer we have, that grade 12 summer. And because the university is a transition really from your old life into your new one, or just pretty much a complete life change, you should really enjoy that time you have with your family and friends. So going back to the work-life balance part, as a RA or a Don, what advice do you give to your students to get that work-life balance?
Honestly, the main advice I give them is to like lose this concept that, to do well, like academically, you need to grind it all out. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be a good programmer, you need to spend 10 hours a day on leet code. Like just drop that concept and recognize that every facet of your life is connected with each other. Your physical health is related to your mental health, is related to your academic success, is related to your social success, is related to your physical health. Like, it's all interconnected, and that's something that's really important to recognize. Like, let's say I'm stuck on this physics project that I have, right? I'm trying to, let's say, I don't know, like chart the velocity of a rocket ship as it's, taking off. And I don't know how to set up this conservation of mass equation. I can spend the next 3 hours trying to grind it out and get frustrated and not figure it out because I'm trying the same things over and over again. Or maybe I can go to the gym for 30 minutes and, just get that physical exercise, get that outlet, and, lose that frustration and feel reinvigorated, and then come back. And all of a sudden that problem is so much easier than I thought it was. You know what I mean? Like, all of these things are linked. And finding academic success isn't necessarily equal. Like, it doesn't necessarily come from putting in 25 hours a day into like grinding out academics. Like, balance is super underrated, I think. And even with the whole like partying thing, like honestly, like I mean, if that's something you enjoy, that's also important to do. Like, explore all these different facets and enjoy this time as like while you're still a student, because I think the student life,
Yeah, and
there's lots.
going back to the work-life balance part, I know one of the things that Waterloo really struggles with is mental health, and it's because of this constant pressure that's always there to work, and if you're not working, it feels like you're doing something wrong. That really gets to people, and it's almost gotten to me in the past as well, and it's it's something that's changing for sure, but it's definitely a big problem there, and that the way to avoid that, or the way I've found to avoid that, is to make sure that I work hard and play hard. And I know once again, I think that's a cliche thing to say, but it's really relevant, because if you don't do that, if you don't take your time out to for yourself, things can get really dark.
Yeah, man. Like, touching on that, like, mental health piece, that's definitely a major concern. And I think it's not just Waterloo. It's a lot of universities in general. I think our demographic is a pretty vulnerable one. And I hate to bring like statistics into this kind of thing, but actually Waterloo is pretty average in terms of mental health crises. But average in itself is not good, because there's too many incidents, right? And I think a lot of it kind of comes down to the pressure, like you were saying, of like constantly working and the burnout that it can lead to. I think B is also like not having the system around you that supports perceived failures. Like realistically, if you go back to like a bad day you had, right? That day really has no impact on you today. It really didn't have that day. Like, one interview you bombed in 1A, it hasn't changed where you're at right now. It hasn't stopped you from achieving anything at all, because that one day in the grand scheme of things is inconsequential. It's more about your overall attitude and your overall hard work and effort and whatnot. And so that one day isn't consequential, but during that one day, it's very easy to get sucked into this attitude, right? Of like, oh my goodness, that's the worst thing that could have happened. And when these kind of things happen consistently, and there is that negative feedback loop, and you don't have this outside reinforcement that no, it's okay, it's honestly fine if you're struggling for this term, because this isn't preventing you from being successful in the future. This is one term, right? This is one incident, and for the tough things you go through, you're also going to go through some positive things. And I think like a lack of having that kind of support network is a really major factor. And continue.
And people should go reach out for that support if they need it. That the time you take for that support is worth so much, because your mental health really means everything. So if you need help, go get it. There's no reason you shouldn't. Everything else should come second to that, honestly.
And honestly, like I know people who like when it's with you, right, you're like, oh no, but like I don't have like a mental health issue, I'm just going through a stressful period right now, right? Okay, it's mounting, it's becoming difficult for me to like cope with this, but hey, like I don't, that's for other people, right? I don't need this. And I know a lot of people who have been in that position where they feel like that's not for them, it's for other people, you know what I mean? But they go out, they try it, and it actually changes their life. Just because honestly, everyone could use help. I can use help. You can use help. Everyone can use it, and everyone needs it at some point in your life.
And I mean, everybody goes through those dark times. But I will say one thing. I think one really good thing that's happening now is that negative stigma that was attached to getting help before, that's getting eliminated, as it should be. There's nothing wrong with getting help. If you need it, you should get it. And it shouldn't be looked down upon. And I'm really happy, for example, in sports, DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love spoke about their mental health last year, and they were commended for it. More people should do too, because this is a serious issue, and there should not be a negative stigma attached to it.
Yeah, like if your foot was broken, you would go to the doctor to get a cast for it, right? We don't see that as something that's weak, but unfortunately, like in the past, we've kind of developed a stigma where it's like, if, you do the same thing for your mental health, all of a sudden, it's because you can't tough it out. But really, there's no difference. There's really no difference between mental health and physical health. I think they're one and the same. And I really like how, like, now we've kind of transitioned into society. And obviously there's still a lot of improvements we need to make, but it's becoming less and less of like there's been less and less negative stigma associated with getting help, because really you're doing yourself a favor by reaching out.
Yeah, 100%. And now to transition a little bit, let's talk about the future of education as a whole. So at the beginning of the podcast, I was talking about how we would talk about our experiences in engineering and in Waterloo, but also about the trends in the technology field relating to education. And one of those trends right now is MOOCs, massive open online courses. And like, some examples of that is Coursera, edX, and Udemy. And it's so interesting to me because, ever since the internet first came out, I felt like it's been solving major problems ever since. And the one problem that's defined the 2010s that the internet has solved is connecting people, whether that be with companies like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. All these companies span from that goal of connecting with people. And I think it's been solved for the most part. Of course, there's more things that can be done, but for the most part, most people around the world, as long as they have internet access, can be connected to one another. And to me, getting educational resources online, or having the ability to get a world-class education online, is the next thing the internet will solve. I know one of the quotes that Coursera's CEO had was something along the lines of, that education will solve most of the world's problems. And I can't help but agree with that, because truly I believe it will. And I that's something I can get behind. It will be really interesting to see how many more people MOOCs enable to get a great education, because what they allow people to do is, regardless of circumstance, have the flexibility to pursue an education.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you brought that up. I mean, honestly, like, think back to like one of your co-ops as well, maybe your first co-op, right? Mm-hmm. Those, like, the software developers you worked with, right? How many of them actually had a degree in software engineering?
Yeah, well, my boss for my first co-op was actually our history major, which doesn't really have much to do with software, but he was still the lead developer for the project.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like a growing trend. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to apply to every program or every field, and it's not going to apply to every, every individual, because everyone has different ways they function. But that is kind of like an inevitable future. I think a lot of stuff is going to, a lot of education is going to transfer online, because it just makes more sense that way, I think. Mm-hmm. That being said, I don't think, universities are going anywhere. Because I think it'll be pretty amazing. I mean, we do have online courses that get accredited, but like entire programs fully online, especially professional programs getting accredited. I feel like even from just like a financial standpoint, and from, just a administrative standpoint, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, or at least not in the near future. But education, I think education is a bit different from the degree. Like, for example, like right now at Waterloo, I'll admit it, I'll be the first to admit it, I'm paying for my degree, right? Like, the tuition I pay, I'm paying so that I can get that, ring on my, pinky finger, and so that I can, be determined, like I can be considered this professional in this industry. Right. And that can help me gain one.
The concept, it's just
I mean, I'm learning along the way for sure. Yeah. I think there's definitely some collateral, but I think a lot of what I've learned has been outside of what I'm paying for with tuition, to be honest.
Okay.
And I think these like online MOOCs or whatever you called it, I think this is like really like a major I think it's a major influence on like the entire shape of the education industry. Like right now I can go online and I can look at all the course content for every single MIT course. Like I can get an MIT education, maybe not an MIT degree, but I can get an MIT education. Obviously, I won't have the actual professors teaching me, and so I mean it's not the same thing. It really isn't. But like all of this stuff is out there. Like you said, like Udemy, Coursera, like these programs, like there's just so much to learn from this. And I think that's honestly like where a lot of education is going to be headed. Again, I'm not sure about getting degrees and getting that certification, but education certainly. Even Khan Academy, like how big is that? How many people nowadays use Khan Academy like regularly? Like almost everyone I know, like in like towards the end of their high school, has watched at least one Khan Academy video at some point. You know what I mean?
I think actually, well, going back to what you said previously, I think it's an interesting discussion because I think eventually we're going to reach a point where it will be all online because you were saying that you don't think universities are going anywhere, and definitely I don't think in the near future that will, but already just the way I think about it, I think the local campus will be there, but I think the primary mode will be online because the universities can now have access to not only their local student base, but the global student base. And there's a big population of people to educate around the world. For example, in Waterloo's case, they don't only have to stick to Canada or the people who want to come to the campus in Waterloo, but they can go beyond their borders, whether that be China, India, wherever, and they can get that same education online. And I'm not saying that's the case for right now, but I think that's what we're going to transition to. And actually, Coursera, they have an MBA program, I think, from the University of Chicago, already on Coursera. So we're already seeing a transition to that. It's just interesting to me that when are we going to reach a point where universities are going to focus completely on that? Because I think that's where we're heading to a point where only where universities will focus completely on that. And it'll sort of be like relational example could be like choosing your streaming service, where you choose Spotify, Google Play Music, or Apple Music for what you want to do or what you want to listen to, and in the same way you can choose which university you want a degree from based on what suits your needs. But yeah, no, for sure, it'll definitely be really interesting to see how the transition to online will be.
No, like I actually like I do agree with most of that. Like I do think this is where education is headed, and it makes sense. Like logistically, it makes sense. You can reach out to more people. It can be done out of the convenience of like if I have certain hours, like maybe I'm working, right, and I'm trying to get this education, I can model it around my hours, and it makes sense like to like a large extent. But stuff like, for example, research, right? Like that's kind of hard to necessarily do online. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
So there's still going to be some facets, I think, that are going to be attached to these institutions. And plus, it's a big industry as well. It's an industry that makes a lot of money, education. And anything, like any industry like this, I kind of like to think of it as like a dinosaur industry. They've been around for a long time and they're massive. And I think a lot of these type of industries, they tend to stick around because, from within, there's a lot of resistance to change. Like, yeah. Can you imagine a tenured prof who basically is at a point where, they can't be fired, wanting to freely give up all of these benefits and perks they have that they've worked so hard for? You know what I mean? So I think internally it's difficult to drive that change, but obviously externally, and I think it's going to apply to a lot of fields. And I think you're right. I mean, pretty soon it's going to start applying to many fields, like MBAs, for example. I think it's definitely going to apply to stuff like software, and it already has been. I think a lot of people in software are self-educated or educated online. But I think, yeah, it is going to start shifting online. But on the other hand, you have things like I said, research earlier, but maybe even like some of the lab work you do in your computer engineering, right? Like, I actually think like it would be cool if, like, let's say you go sign up for one of these courses, and one of the lessons is like, like one of the courses maybe, as you're taking the lessons, works through you actually building, let's say, a project. Maybe you're building like a speaker system or something. And so in the beginning of the class, I guess, they send you like a bill of materials or like a DigiKey like list and stuff, and you just order the stuff to your place, and you actually work along with the videos. I think that's super neat, and that's something super attainable. But I think like also some of this like really expensive lab equipment you've been working on in some of those labs, right? Like that's also some hands-on exposure that you wouldn't be getting.
So I definitely see the research point, especially. I definitely get that. And that has to be more of a local type of thing. But especially for undergraduate degrees, now you bring up the hardware point for the labs, and I definitely see that point. But something like computer science, like most of your labs are going to be software oriented.
Pretty much all of them, probably,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much all of them. But, that's why it's so interesting because, okay, why did he come to Waterloo? I know for me personally, I just thought, it was the best program I could go into. And, I was in Calgary beforehand, but I thought it was worth the jump to come out east to Waterloo. But if you told me that I could get the same education, the same resources, the only difference is it's all online, but the lectures are the same, the professors are the same, and I'm paying half my tuition, but I get to stay at home. That seems like a pretty reasonable trade-off, and I would have to really consider it if it was worth going all the way to the university physically, or just doing it as an online thing if it's the exact same degree. And that's what the future offers. And I don't see many undergrad students leaving their house or going out of their way to go to the university physically if they can get the same thing online. I mean, we're already seeing the transition to online from almost everything. And yeah, it's interesting for sure. I know when it comes to degrees, Coursera is adding a bunch of degrees to our platform. So I know it's probably only time that we get to that point. And, a quick statistic is that MOOCs actually have 100 million users right now, 900 plus universities, and 11.4K courses on right now. And I know how it works for most degrees is that you have certain categories that you have to check off pretty much. So you have to take a certain amount of courses from each category, and if you do so, you get your degree.
Yeah.
And with MOOCs already having 11.4K courses available online, how long will it really be until those degrees are available online? I mean, you already see that with online courses and a lot of people satisfying the requirements for that, but I think it becoming the standard isn't too far away, and that's pretty interesting. It'll be pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, and it's not like you need to have this like supervision that like, oh, people are actually watching their online lectures, because really you don't have any supervision that people are actually going to class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think we are already seeing it headed a lot in that direction. And even like if you look at like some of the courses I'm taking at Waterloo, like I've taken an online course before, right? Like, why couldn't I have taken all of my courses online before?
Yeah.
And if that was the case, why could I have not just taken them from home in Calgary? Like, why did I even need to come here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, there's a lot you're going to be missing if you don't go to university for university. You're going to be missing the whole interaction piece of university and a lot of other things. But to narrow our scope strictly to talk about the degree in education, it's going to be interesting to see how MOOCs change the scene, because how are universities going to stay competitive in the future? Why should I go locally to a university when I can do it online at my own flexibility and have the same resources that I would at university, for a third or a half of the cost. How will universities attract students locally when it makes much more sense to do it online and price-wise and flexibility-wise?
Yeah, so I think like that is a factor. That's a major factor. But I think in the end, it's actually going to kind of fall into some gray area in between, because like if I follow that logic of like, why would I pay extra if I can just have this degree chilling at home and I can have the same degree for less cost? You lived in residence, right, in first year?
Yeah.
Why did you do that? That it's about twice as expensive as living off campus.
That's true. And yeah, I think I agree. I see where you're getting at, that the experience as a university as a whole outweighs just the education part of it. But I'm just curious to see how many people would just opt out to do the online component rather than take the whole experience.
Yeah, no, that's true. Because definitely it will be. For some people, it wouldn't even be in question, right? Like this, like having the opportunity to do, pursue this education for cheaper and to do it, from their own home, like it opens up an opportunity that otherwise would not have been there. Like this is the only way they can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, on one hand, you're going to be missing out on those great experiences you have in university, but at the same time, more people can get educated. So it opens up a conversation from both ends that, what are the benefits and positives? Of course, I still believe that education for more people is definitely more of a positive, but it's interesting to think about how we might be losing that experience that university gives to so many people.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see how MOOCs change the next 50 years, and when way along in the future when we have kids, will they be going to university somewhere else, or will they be sitting at home learning online? That'll be interesting to see. Of course, I'll tell them the benefits of my experience, but who knows? If that's the standard, right? But especially for students who decided to stay home, like some of my high school friends, it's going to be especially interesting for them because if you're a so-called day scholar, why even leave your house? Why even make the trip to university if you want to stay at home? Just use the resources online. Doesn't that make more sense? So I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how that changes as well.
And yeah, not just for them as well, even for you, Davik. Like, let's go back to 2016, maybe like spring 2016, when the acceptances are coming in, and you get an acceptance for Waterloo online, where you stay at home, the degree is cheaper, and you still have access to Co-op job board. Like it's the same co-op program, and you have all those perks. It's still equally reputed institution. Maybe like why wouldn't you do it? Maybe you would have. Maybe you would have chosen to have a degree where you stay at home, and it's cheaper. You get to stay with all your friends from high school because everyone's staying basically where they grew up. For this degree, financially it makes sense, and you still get the perks of that institution. Like you still get to use Waterloo's job board, you still go through that co-op program. But I at the same time, I still see like kind of like the downsides. Like, would you then have access or easy access to some of the information that helped bring you to where you are right now, and B, would you have the the self-discipline and the drive to push yourself to do a lot of the things that you have done today because, in some cases you had to, like, for example, like if I wasn't staying, here, and I had my friends in class, and if I wasn't in this situation, would I have, consistently actually paid attention in class and followed through and done the due diligence? I mean, yeah, at some point you can say, yeah, it's your responsibility to look after yourself, and it totally is. But for other people, like some people work better when there's a little bit of that push. Like for people who don't necessarily know what they want to do. Like, for example, if I know I want to learn X programming language, right? I can go on Udemy and take a course in that, and I can push myself because I want to learn this properly, and I can do all the due diligence, and I would have learned. But if I'm not sure what I want to do, I find tech and like maybe I find computer science super interesting, but I'm not sure what I want to do. Without that push factor, maybe I don't do it.
To directly contrast that, if you get to choose, I know for me, I get more stuff done at night. So if I get to choose that I can sleep until 12 and then work to whenever I want, and I wasn't limited by lecture material and had 24/7 access to it, that has its own benefits. Because I'm not forced to go to class at a certain time. And I know even right now with the online resources I have for my classes, it's already, I already struggle with going to class regardless. But if I had the lectures online, I probably would not go because I like to do it at my own time. And right now the lecture times usually don't suit me. And so it's interesting because I understand the point that maybe you need that push, but at the same time, if you can be flexible with the material and do it whenever you want to do it rather than whenever you're forced to do it, that has its own benefits. And that.
Yep. And honestly, I think like regardless of like how we can speculate this now, I think the bottom line is MOOCs are here to stay. They are the next big thing in education. I mean, they're the current big thing in education, if I'm being honest. And I think they're going to be here to stay. And I think time will tell how successful they are, how widely they're adopted, and just how long it takes for them to, or if even they become basically the gold standard and the leading standard.
And I mean, the market is huge, right? Because you're not like I said before, you're not only limited by the locality. It can become a global product, and that's not only for the companies that are facilitating online courses like Coursera and edX and Udemy. It goes straight to the universities as well, because it'll become making a competitive global product that can reach the masses. So it will definitely be really interesting to see how education changes from what it is right now to an online product that each university puts out, and how that will change the varying degrees of quality of education. And thanks for coming on, Devi. I know this is the first podcast, so there's definitely a lot of things I could have done better, or we could have done better, but it's a learning process and we'll see how it goes. But I really do appreciate you being my guinea pig for my first guest. I really enjoyed talking to you.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I'll ever get used to just talking to my phone, except knowing that there's going to be other people listening. Yeah. But hey, hopefully I wasn't too awkward on your podcast, and best of luck to you, man. I look forward to listening to the ones to come.
Well, to everyone who stuck around till the end, thanks for listening to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'll see how frequently I can do this, but just check my LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play Music, wherever you came from. I'll definitely be there. And stay tuned for the next one. If you have any constructive criticism or feedback, please do let me know. I definitely want to improve my quality. I know there's a lot of things I can improve, so let me know. And if you have any topics you'd like us to talk about, please send them over. All right, till next time, guys. Thanks.